This is Marta from Ruby Soup with Pearl Juice, and this is Top 5 Wednesday. Top 5 Wednesday is a Goodreads group that hosts weekly events where bloggers and YouTubers and Tumblr ponds people that do stuff with books can list 5 books in the theme of the week. And it is hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Thomas. I'll leave the links to these things down below. And because this week it's Thanksgiving, the theme for this week was books we are thankful for. And I'm an overseas American. I was born in Manhattan in New York, and I moved to Sweden when I was around 5. My family doesn't really celebrate Thanksgiving all that much, but we try. But because my dad is not really present in Sweden this week, we won't be able to celebrate it this year. So I thought that instead of having a family event, I would just do this video. So, happy Thanksgiving. And with that all said, let's get on to the list. Coming in on number 5 is Harvey B. Carr's Best of American Splendor. Now, American Splendor was a kind of like comic strip that a man called Harvey B. Carr would write, and different artists as like Joe Sacco and Robert Crumb, they would do the drawings. This collection, Best of American Splendor, really has touched me in many ways because Harvey B. Carr talks about things that almost anyone can relate to. He talks about money struggles, like economical struggles, and he talks about feeling isolated from everyday life. He talks about how just difficult it is to just go out there and work sometime. And it's really, I think anyone could be moved by these stories because anyone can relate to these things. And also, like, on a super personal level, in this collection, there's a story about an autistic man who reached out to Harvey B. Carr and started telling his story. And this part of the comic about this autistic man who's telling his story, it really touched me because back then I had just gotten my diagnosis with autism spectrum, and I was really kind of struggling with that identity. And this storyline really helped me through a difficult time. So that is one reason I'm thankful for it. Okay, so coming in on number 4 is a short story called Sinking by Yu Dafu. Now, Yu Dafu was a Chinese author who wrote in the 1920s, 1930s. Mr. Yu himself was very controversial because he talked very openly about sexuality in his writing, which was not common back then. Especially in Sinking, for those who might be a little bit sensitive to this stuff, Sinking has several references to masturbation. But besides all the controversy, Sinking is very much like a story of depression. It is about a young man who, he's Chinese, but he is studying in Japan. And he is dealing with problems with like with sleep, and he has erratic reading habits. He has erratic eating habits, and he feels really alone, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. He kind of has a bit of a despair about where his life is going. And despite this being about a Chinese student in Japan in the 1920s, the way depression is described in this short story like really hit hard for me when I read it. And I kind of felt like almost like, I mean, this is really banal, but when I read this story, I felt like, well, this is just like my life, which is ridiculous, of course, but just the feelings and the emotions and the thoughts that this man was talking about struggling to read and struggling to sleep and struggling with just understanding his place in the world really spoke to me. Because short story is very much about college blues, about when you're young and you kind of have a depression because you don't know what you're doing with your life, and you're not sure like where you're going. But also, and Kirsten Dusk, for instance, said once that she believes that everybody goes through a depression at some point in their life, and I agree with her. And this short story, this really is so honest and so like open and straightforward about depression that it is really remarkable. I have actually done a full review on this short story. I'll leave that linked below if people are interested. But just on a personal level, this story, like, I really connected to it. I really felt like Yudafu was talking about things that I myself had kind of experienced. I actually remember I even was thinking when I was reading the story, like, oh, how could he possibly know about this? So, I mean, that's the magic of reading in a way, that regardless of things that make us different, like nationality and background and gender and all that kind of stuff, literature is also able to kind of show us that regardless of all that, there are also universal things that tie us together. And yeah, so that's another reason to be thankful for Sinking. So, all right, moving on to number 3 is a cliche, but what the hell? Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Um, you all probably know what those are. Those are a 7-volume, kind of middle grade that became young adult fantasy novels about a boy who goes off to have wacky adventures at his school until things kind of escalate very quickly, and then he has to fight against the ultimate evil, which is basically like the wizard world equivalent of Nazis. I am thankful for these books because not only because of the fandom, but I mean, there's so many people that I've been able to talk to that have also read these books, and we strike up a conversations, and I still remember these conversations because it's been so lively, and I've really connected to other people because we both enjoyed the same material. And like, I was introduced to Harry Potter through my godfather, who works in publishing houses in Finland, and he bought me these books and we read them together, and then we would actually even go and see the movies. He would take me to the movies when I was young, and even for that I'm very grateful, because him and me, like, I have so many great memories of spending time with my godfather because we bonded over our similar interests in Harry Potter. So it's just like, I mean, literature brings people together. That's basically just, I guess, what I'm trying to say here. And that is also something to be thankful for, that literature is really this thing that kind of brings people together and creates such wonderful memories. And yeah, so I will always be thankful to Harry Potter for that. All right. Now coming in, number 2 is Waiting for the Barbarians by G.M. Cucci. Waiting for the Barbarians is a literary fiction book written by the Nobel Prize winning South African author G.M. Cucci. And this book is like, it's kind of hard to define it, but basically it takes place in an unnamed country where there's all this talk about barbarians, that the barbarians are coming and the barbarians are going to come and destroy our world and do horrible things to us. So then some people in the government and start going and harassing certain individuals that are claimed to be barbarians. And then there's a magistrate who is the main character. He kind of goes to investigate this, and he finds out that there's all sorts of terrible, like, torture and rape and all sorts of horrible things going on there. And he decides to try and do something about this, but it doesn't really work out, and things kind of take off from there. And the reason why I am thankful for this book is because, I don't say this lightly, but this book really did change my life. I read this book when I was 15, and I had tears in my eyes when I was reading this story. It really moved me, And it also made me like really aware about human right abuses and how often human right abuses occur just on a global scale. And I also read this book during the Bush era in America, and that motivated me to join human rights organizations to try and put a stop to the stuff that was happening back then. And it just really, yeah, I mean, I don't think I would be the person today if I hadn't read this book. Because I still work a lot with human rights cases. I volunteer with human rights activism and, try to go out there and make a difference. And I don't think that I would be doing that if it wasn't for this book. And for that, I am thankful because it made me the person that I am today. All right, and now we come to number 1. And the book that I am most thankful for, this year at least, is Finis Avila, edited by Christian Borg. Finis Avila is a Swedish essay collection book that was published just last year. And it is an anthology of Sweden-Finn writers, people that are second and third generation of Finnish descent who live in Sweden. And these essays are all very personal, and they all talk about just the different experiences of being of Finnish background and living in Sweden. And a lot of these people that are writing, they are like in their 30s and 40s, some are in their 20s. And some of these, like there's one guy who he's also a Roma descent, and then there's some people that one of their parents is from Finland, and then another one of their parents is like, for instance, from Iraq or Iran. So there's like a lot of different voices in this collection. And the reason why I'm thankful for this book is because, well, firstly, in the discussions about identity and integration and that kind of stuff, despite Finnish speakers being like 5%, we are like, for the longest time, we weren't really seen in the political atmosphere in Sweden. But when this book came out, we actually kind of started getting recognized, and then people actually started talking about that. Well, there's the 5 national minorities that from the 1990s on have actually kind of been there, but we don't really talk about them much. Like, and the Sweden Finns are one of them. And like now, Sweden Finns are kind of like something that people are also getting to know what that term means and inside of Sweden. And there's a lot more discussion about our rights and about kind of bringing back the Finnish culture in Sweden, because we were the same country for 700 years. And then at some point there was a little bit of amnesia going on, and this book kind of helped Sweden to kind of memorize something that they had forgotten. And then also, like, again, on a personal level, I am also of Finnish descent, and a lot of the things that the people in this book talk about, like this stigmas around speaking Finnish and the stigmas of having like a Finnish accent or Finnish background, they talk about these struggles in this book. And I really connected to this book on such a personal level. A little bit like what I was saying was sinking before. Like this book, like there were so many sentences in this anthology where I thought that, well, this is exactly what I've been thinking. This is exactly what I've been feeling. I've also been in this situation and felt like this. And before I used to think like maybe I'm just crazy, maybe I'm just hypersensitive. But when I read this anthology, I realized that no, it is legitimate what I have felt and what I have thought, that I am not alone in these feelings and these thoughts. And this book, this really made me feel like that what I had experienced was true. And yeah, and it was almost like it also helped me to get closure to certain things. And it also has kind of motivated me because now I actually feel like that there is actually a future for Sweden Finns, that that we're actually being seen and we're being heard. And not only that, but things, things actually can get better. And I also really like this book because it also, while it did talk about things that I had experienced, it also made me question my own privilege. Because, like I said, there's one guy in here who talks about his experience of not only being a Finnish speaker, but also being a Finnish speaking Romani. And he talked about how other Finnish speakers had kind of turned their backs on the Finnish speaking Roma. And then, of course, like I said, some of the people in this book are also biracial, and they kind of talk about how Sweden Finns can sometimes pass because they're white, but then, like, if you're biracial, then you can't. And I always appreciate that when I get to kind of learn about other people's experiences and see, like, the stuff that they go through. Like, there's a really sad story in here about Selua Al-Sati, I think her name is. Her dad's from Iraq. And she kind of talked about when she confronted some neo-Nazis that thought that she wasn't really Swedish because her dad was from Iraq. So there was also like stories in here that really taught me a lot also about white privilege, oddly enough, even if you wouldn't think that from the title. So yeah, so that's one reason why I am thankful for that book. And if you see this in a bookstore, I really recommend that you pick it up. It is just so fantastic. And it's like I said, it's personal essays. So it's not like this kind of like a lot of nonfiction is kind of like sometimes dry academic language. That's not the case at all with this book. So yeah, if you live in Sweden and you speak Swedish and you see this in a bookstore, pick it up. It's well worth your time. Yeah. Okay, so that was the 5 books that I'm thankful for this year, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up or subscribe. If any of these books kind of made you think about something, comment down below. I'm always open for thoughts and comments from the viewers. Yeah, and I'll see you in my next video.